See? The bigger they are, the harder they fall.
Back in 1966, Dodge introduced a new fastback sport coupe that shared the same platform as their existing Coronet coupe. Although the fastback design didn't help as much as they had hoped for NASCAR, a redesign for 1968 would later become one of the most recognizable models, even today, thanks to movie and television roles. After a sad and somewhat forgettable rebranding in the 80s as a front-drive subcompact,
today that legend lives again in Dodge Charger 2.2.
The Charger name would return nearly 2 decades later on a new rear-drive large sedan platform shared with then-partner Daimler-Benz, and until the end of 2023 would defy expectations as the best-selling sports sedan among Detroit's Big Three. This is the story of the Dodge Charger. This is my old car. As I am writing this episode at the start of 2024, the Dodge Charger, along with its platform mates the Dodge Challenger and Chrysler 300, officially entered production in their longtime home of Brampton, Ontario, at the end of 2023. If you are watching this episode in late 2024 or beyond, there may be a new Charger, most likely an EV, but maybe also a V6 gas engine version. Although the 300 languished in its final years, the Charger and its two-door sibling, the Challenger, defied the odds in this SUV-happy market of the U.S. It essentially came full circle from its 1960s muscle car roots, although parent Chrysler had made some disappointing decisions in the late 70s and 80s that could have tarnished the brand name for good. Although Chrysler would later emphasize Dodge as their performance division, back in the mid-60s, it was instead the Plymouth brand that had the performance focus, thanks to the 1964 Barracuda. The Barracuda's size made it comparable to the Ford Mustang, and although the Barracuda's release was 2 weeks earlier, the Mustang's popularity created a new automotive category, the pony car. Although the Barracuda sales didn't come close to the Mustang, Dodge dealers still saw the potential and wanted a version of the Barracuda as well. However, doing so would create too much internal competition, so the design that would eventually become the Charger would be larger, and true to Dodge form at the time, would focus more on luxury. To save on development, it would also share much of their existing Coronet coupe.
Fabulous new full-size fastback Charger.
The Charger's biggest difference from the Coronet would be its dramatic fastback roofline, a design which at the time looked similar to the AMC Rambler Marlin. The Marlin was AMC's personal luxury car, not a sports car, and rarely makes any list of beautiful cars. The Dodge was a bit better looking, but the similarity made it clear that Dodge wasn't ready to jump too far into the sports car market. The Charger had unique features that invoke luxury, such as hidden headlights, the first Dodge to ever offer them.
I didn't do nothing, man. I didn't do nothing. Honest, I didn't.
It also had a simulated wood grain steering wheel and 4 bucket seats with a full-length console, although the rear center console only lasted that 1 year. V8 engines were the only option back then, ranging from a 5.2-liter to a 7.2-liter Magnum or a 7-liter Hemi, the latter being a rare option. But Dodge also had a second motive behind the Charger's fastback roofline, as they hoped its more aerodynamic shape would provide Chrysler a better option for NASCAR. However, it had an unexpected side effect, as it lessened the downforce on the rear, which in turn worsened rear traction. The problem was reduced by the addition of a small rear spoiler, which by homologation rules required that it be added onto existing 1966 models. The 67 model was considered a sales flop, selling only around 15,000 units, about half of 1966. The first-gen Charger only lasted 2 years, as a significantly revised second-gen arrived for 1968.
Charge! Get going again! Enter Dr. Pepper's Charge! Get going again sweepstakes!
The fastback roof was replaced with a more modest angle for the rear window, along with Coke bottle styling that raised the rear fenders. And although the luxury touches were toned down from the previous gen, it still kept its hidden headlights. A rear bench replaced the rear buckets, and the base engine was now an inline 6. A further example that Dodge was willing to transition the Charger away from luxury and more towards performance was the addition of the RT model. The Magnum and Hemi engines from 1967 carried over, and new for 68 was a Scat Pack trim, which Dodge promoted with a cartoon Bumblebee, a version of which returned on Chargers decades later. The rear window on the 68 was recessed behind the rear roofline, which although may have looked cool, it was an unintended problem for NASCAR, as it was helping to slow the cars down. As a result, for 1969, Dodge built just under 400 copies of the special Charger 500 model with a revised rear window, along with the Coronet's front end with exposed headlights, to satisfy the NASCAR homologation rules. Dodge managed to sell over 96,000 Chargers for 1968, and I'm sure some of those sales could be attributed to its role in the movie Bullitt, starring Steve McQueen. The movie's most famous car chase in San Francisco between the bad guy's Charger and McQueen's Mustang is typically near the top, if not at the top, of the best movie car chases in history. With such a strong sales year for 1968, the 69s only had minor changes, the most noticeable being revised taillights and a chrome split on the front grille. Although it still sold well, the 69 would have to wait 10 years before it would become what many consider to be the most famous car in TV history. Starring as a General Lee on the Dukes of Hazzard beginning in 1979, the car got as much, if not more, fan mail than Bo and Luke Duke did. It also was indestructible and could jump huge distances with barely a scratch. Or at least those of us who were kids back then believed, not knowing that most every jump destroyed the car. We also didn't know that the trunks were filled with cement to prevent the front-heavy cars from nosediving and landing on their roofs. With typically a minimum of 2 jumps per episode, there were over 300 Chargers used during the course of the show's 7-year run. Some of the Chargers used in the show were 1968 models, with the front and rear ends swapped out to make them look like 69s, as over time it became harder and harder to find replacement cars. In the final couple seasons, supply got so short, not to mention the stunts becoming too unsafe, that many of the jumps were filmed with scale models. Yet even as a kid, I knew those were fake. 1969 was also the year that yet another NASCAR version of the Charger was designed, called the Charger Daytona, due to the Charger 500 in '68 not living up to expectations. The biggest issue was a blunt front end, so a new 18-inch nose cone was added to the front, and a huge wing over the trunk, bolted to the subframe, and was 23 inches tall. The wing supposedly needed to be so tall to ensure the best airflow, but it was also conveniently just tall enough for the trunk to be open fully.
You suck! You do!
Only 503 Charger Daytonas were built for 1969, and replaced with a similar-looking Plymouth Superbird for 1970. These models had such a huge advantage on the track that by the end of 1970, NASCAR had any future wing cars limited to 5-liter V8s, smaller than what the Dodge and Plymouth models had. The third-gen Charger began in 1971, and at least in the short term, it was committed to being a muscle car.
The all-new Dodge Charger sets the style for 71.
Exposed round headlights now replace the hidden headlights, although in 71 and 72, you could still get hidden headlights as an option. Yet despite its muscle car intentions, emission standards for 1972 forced the largest 440 cubic inch engine to be dropped before the end of 1971. Some of the earlier models of this generation could also get a Ram Charger hood scoop as an option, but that too soon became unavailable. Although sales topped over 100,000 for 1973, the majority of those were non-performance models.
No, that's Mr. Wilson, one of our regular customers. I was just going to take him out for a demonstration drive.
And included the SE trim with 3 opera-style windows behind the B-pillar and a vinyl roof, signaling a move back to more luxury-oriented models. By 1974, the final year of the third gen, the performance-focused models had their final year.
But who was that masked man?
Why, he's the,
The Dodge Boys ride again!
The fourth gen Charger, which lasted from 1975 through 78, changed so much from the third gen that you'd be excused for not recognizing them as Chargers as compared to the previous models. They definitely didn't look like muscle cars anymore, which was appropriate since they didn't have the muscle car engines to back them up.
Hey, Charger! I don't like to brag, but I made this outfit myself.
Strangely, Dodge still offered a sporty-looking trim and called it the Charger Daytona, but it was merely an appearance package. This fourth gen would not compete in NASCAR, as their boxy shape simply couldn't compete, but surprisingly, NASCAR allowed Dodge to compete with third gen models. The last model year, 1978, was cut short and was replaced with the Magnum Coupe, which itself only lasted 2 years. By 1981, the Charger name had been missing from Dodge's lineup for 3 years, and with most of their lineup being shrunk in size, and muscle cars being a thing of the past, Dodge brought back the Charger name on a car that probably deserved it the least. In 1979, the subcompact Dodge Omni and its twin, the Plymouth Horizon, offered slightly longer two-door hatchback versions called the Omni 024 and Horizon TC3. Those names didn't exactly evoke any sporty intentions, because the engine was a 1.7-liter four-cylinder imported from Volkswagen. By 1983, the 024 name was dropped, and it simply became the Dodge Charger, and there was even a Shelby Charger, designed by Carroll Shelby, with a turbocharger, but power was still barely over 100 horsepower. The best the Shelby Charger ever did was 174 horsepower in its final year of 1987. Once its replacement, the Dodge Shadow, arrived for 1988, everyone figured the Charger name was gone for good. But that changed in 1999 with the public unveiling of the Dodge Charger RT concept. This concept, headed up by Chrysler chief stylist Tom Gale, was designed before the 1998 merger and later takeover of Daimler-Benz, so it never went beyond the concept stage. The long front hood was a big departure for Chrysler, as the cab-forward design of the LH models, such as the Dodge Intrepid, had been a big hit since 1993. The concept's V8 engine was powered by compressed natural gas, so that feature likely wouldn't have made it to production either. However, its 4 doors would.
This car is so clean it qualifies as an ultra-low emissions vehicle. You could even drive it in pollution-paranoid California, where it's against federal law to break wind in public.
Oh, cock.
With Daimler more or less in charge, a new rear drive platform containing several Mercedes-Benz E-Class and S-Class components would later become the new Charger. Following the end of the Intrepid and its LH body siblings in 2004, this new rear drive platform, LX, would not include the Charger at first, but instead would be the 2005 Dodge Magnum wagon. Switching to rear drive was a risky move, and Chrysler hadn't offered a rear drive sedan since the 1989 Diplomat. But the riskier move was to replace the Intrepid sedan with a wagon. With its optional V8, something the Intrepid never offered, sales were decent, but likely would have been worse had Dodge also offered a sedan. This was rectified for the 2006 model year with the reintroduction of the Charger. The Charger soon took away much of the Magnum sales, so much so that the Magnum was discontinued in 2008. By this point, Chrysler was trying to push Dodge to be its performance division. However, Dodge also had to play the role of the entry-level buyer division, as the Chrysler division was treated as more upscale, and was the only other division that offered a large sedan, specifically the 300, that shared the Charger's LX platform.
Nice car, mister!
Nice bike.
With Dodge having to offer both cheap and fast, the result was the Charger having a much wider range of power and options than it ever did before. The smallest engine offered was starting in 2008 with a 2.7-liter V6 that made just 178 horsepower. It had steel wheels with plastic hubcaps, and cruise control and ABS was optional. With lower grade interior materials, this model only had fleet sales in the US, but was available for public sale in Canada. Compare this to the top-end model, the SRT8, with a 6.1-liter 425 horsepower Hemi V8, the most powerful V8 Chrysler had ever offered up to that point. Both of these models were only available in rear-wheel drive, whereas in between were the SXT and RT trims that had all-wheel drive optional. And there were special editions, bringing back the Daytona name as an upgrade to the RT model, and the Super B version of the SRT8, and a police package, filling a gap in high pursuit options that cops nationwide were hoping for. By 2011, the LX platform was updated to the LD, which made updates to the body panels and interior, but underneath still lied some of the original Daimler engineering, despite Chrysler's connection with Daimler having been severed a few years earlier. This new look included a revised roofline and new sculpting on the doors. The smallest V6 was dropped, and the base 3.6-liter V6, making 292 horsepower, and the SRT8 returned to the top end, making 485 horsepower in Scat Pack trim. By this point, Dodge's Ram trucks had been split off into their own division, and took the Ram's head logo with them, so Dodge started to transition to 2 red slashes that we still see on Dodges today. In 2014, Dodge offered their Pursuit trim to be used exclusively for police duty, and managed the fastest lap time ever during Michigan's vehicle evaluation that same year.
Officer Yuri, Officer Jacob, reporting for duty.
And as before, several different trim levels were offered to provide a wide range of performance options. It was almost as if they were trying to make everyone forget they once put the Charger name on a subcompact with a VW 4-cylinder. The facelift in 2015 resulted in sleeker taillights and headlights, and for most every Charger except for the base models, the trademark Dodge Crosshair grille was gone. What did remain was old carryovers that most every other car had long since changed, such as pull-up door handles, and a basic suspension design that was over a decade old. But Dodge didn't care, and sales didn't falter, because they just kept upping the power, with the SRT Hellcat supercharged V8 that could produce 707 horsepower, taking the title of the fastest 4-door sedan ever produced. However, by 2020, with the trend in electric vehicles gaining momentum, and Chrysler as a whole not showing much advancement with EVs, acknowledged that the current LD platform would finally end in 2023, as they move their focus to EVs. The replacement, as I noted earlier, isn't 100% clear as I write this, but it is possible that the Charger's 2-door sibling, the Challenger, may not live on, and the Charger will be the only one left standing, since the Chrysler 300 won't likely have a direct successor either. But we suspect the new Charger will be plenty fast, but sadly it can't have the engine sounds it once had. Not to say they won't try to make it sound like it once did. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, click the like button and subscribe to my channel. If you once owned a car from the 80s to mid-2000s that you barely see today and would like it featured in a future episode, leave a reply in the comments or contact me at the email shown here. See you next time.